No, it doesn't necessarily like equal great technical ability, organised administrator. Although sometimes people think it does. So I have found myself trying to fix the photocopier at church, even though that's not my job description at all. So my name is Trish. I have been on the team at Bridgman Baptist for 10 years now. But prior to that, I was a primary school teacher. So I grew up in a Christian family, but probably it was actually only from about 3 years old on. So my parents came to faith at the same time, about 6 weeks before my dad died, actually. I relate a lot to that passage in Ruth, where, as it turned out, some Catholic priests, believe it or not, knocked on my parents' door. My dad had terminal cancer, and he came to tell them about Jesus. They came to know him and love him, and then 6 weeks later my dad died, but I was raised then to learn about Jesus and to love him, to love the church. And so I have been very busy in church life and church world, even though even in school, like I loved school. I loved the routine of school. I loved how it could be measured and life was in that. So it was really natural for me to go into uni and start studying teaching. I actually studied teaching and I did an arts degree as well because I love Japanese. Somewhere I think I had this idea that I might go to Japan and be a missionary. Finished high school, went to Japan, hated Japan, so derailed my plans for my life. But that's all right because God had a bigger plan, which is good. So I was teaching for 5 years at a local state school and felt this restlessness to sort of go, not that there's something more. I used to say that there was something more, but it's not that, because I believe fully that God has a call for each one of us, and it can be very much in your vocation that you do. But it was something else. And so I went on a mission trip to the Solomon Islands, and I had this deal I didn't realise I was making with God that said, I will go anywhere for you in the world, God. So obviously mission must be it. So send me somewhere overseas. And God didn't speak to me at all that whole time in terms of the answer that I wanted. And so I got increasingly angry with him, thinking, here I am, this great candidate, I'll go anywhere for you, I've got a teaching degree, I can do whatever you want me to do. And God gave me actually a greater heart for the kids back here in Australia than I had actually for anything else. And the only thing he told me while I was over there was that I was supposed to seek him, which I still thought was a raw deal, because I thought people get really great calls and I got seek God. But that's how I ended up at Bible college. So I came back and started studying. My first subject here at Melian was ministry formation. Do you still do that? Yeah. I started in a classroom full of men and me. And the first question Dee asked was, who has a pastoral call? And every guy in the room put their hand up. And I was like, I'm in the wrong place. But God has a sense of humour, because then about 3 years later I found myself with a pastoral call. So it's been a slow journey for me. So I was teaching and very happy to do that. But my church kind of called me to help out for about 9 months. And then in that process, there's quite a few things that God revealed to me about his hand on my life, the calling he'd given me as well. So I've been now at Bridgman for 10 years. And I don't know if you all know Bridgman, we're quite a large Baptist church. And we're probably unique in the way that we run things. So we have distinct roles, but we have kind of organic roles at the same time. So when people ask me what is my job, like what do I actually do, it's actually hard to define. I simplify it and will say I'm a children's pastor, but that would be only one portion of what I do. And so some of the things that I'm involved in, obviously children's is a big area. My primary school teaching background helps in that, but I oversee, we have probably about 9 different ministries that function under our children's banner. We do development of leadership for youth, and so I will oversee that. So our youth kids who will be involved in our kids ministry and opportunities there, we'll look after that one as well. Connect groups, so we will run connect groups across all ages and stages in our church, and so I will oversee that. Now we've got people who work underneath me who might be more on the ground in different areas. So Andrew Carnell, who does our young families, or Dave Twigg or Matt Sweetman might look after young ads and older young adults. But I kind of oversee then all of that as well, and then the curriculum development of that. And communication that happens between us and the church and between people within church departments as well. I look after the staffing, so our volunteers and the people who will come and work within the office environment. and how that all runs. And when we have events, so we'll have large events where we'll have volunteers. At the beginning of the year we do a garage sale, and that is a huge event for us. We will have in excess of 500 volunteers just helping on the day. And so I will coordinate all the volunteers and the shifts and those kind of things. So a lot of people organisation and things that fit into there as well. Ladies ministry and all the general pastoral duties as well then. So preaching, pastoral care, visitation, those kinds of things that take place. So it's a mixed bag, pretty much. It's never boring. And often from one week to the next week, someone will ask me how my week has been, and I'll say, I don't know. And it's not because I've done nothing, but it's sometimes hard to quantify. And probably that's how most people feel, I think, anyway, in the way that life runs. For me, I am an organised person. I don't know, I was talking to a friend of mine telling them I was going to speak about this, and they thought it was an insult to be asked to come and speak about organised administration. They thought they couldn't think of anything worse. For me, I actually really do love being organised. I have a little picture of a Kiki K shop, just in case you don't know this store. Has anyone been into a Kiki K shop? All the girls say yes. It is probably more girls stationery, to be fair. But the funniest thing happened this one day. I went into a shop, because I often will visit there. I do like Kiki K. It's one of the guaranteed gift presents for me. But I went into the shop, and I was just walking around, and you know how the people will come and they'll say, you know, do you need any help with anything here? I'm like, oh, no, I just love visiting here. It's very calming just walking in here. It's quite nice. And she's like, oh, yes, you've come to the right place. This is where your people are. And I went, oh, great. Now I have like a people group. So, you know, apparently it is true. But I do think sometimes when you think about this role of organised administrator or organisation or administrator, it has some negative things about it. People maybe think it's just either more OCD people, you know, you're just a little bit too particular about things, or you're a dictator, you're the person who cares about all the details and why doesn't anybody follow what you want them to do. And that can be true, there are elements of that take place. But there's more to it as well. And so hopefully today, as we talk through some of the things in a practical sense of ministry, you'll get a bit of a feel for that, particularly if it's not your strength area. Sometimes understanding how people work or what makes things work around that gives you an appreciation for something. And maybe also the way to buy in on somebody else who might have those giftings, how you could actually best use that then, even in your own ministry context as well. Given that there are challenges of understanding why it's valuable, I think that links into some of the challenges involved practically in a ministry setting as well. So I want to deal with some of them first, and then I'll tell you about some of the great things about having an organised administrative person as well. The very first thing I discovered when I went from teaching in a classroom to working in a ministry setting is that you can be too prepared. And that seemed a bit crazy, but actually the reality is there's this tension of being flexible and being prepared and organised that kind of lives in a ministry world. And that's because you're working with people, and that's because people inherently will have things that change all the time, and sometimes maybe it's spirit-led and you might get a new sermon at the last minute, but you just have to be ready for that. And when I started, used to try and be advanced on certain things, and one time I worked really hard to be ready for a sermon because we knew we have like a roster of when we'll be rotating around. And I'd written my sermon with the topic that I'd been given, and I was looking forward to doing that, only to find out 2 days before I was actually coming on that they changed their mind on the whole topic. And so no longer were we preaching on this anymore, it was all different. And so all my preparation and everything that I'd done for that weekend wasn't going to be able to be used anymore in that context. Obviously there might be another time I could use that sermon, but it did actually throw me out because I thought all this time of being organised and ready and honouring that commitment, and yet I still have to be flexible enough to come in. So there's that tension of being ready, but also then being okay with changing, because I can't go back to my boss and say, no deal, I've actually I've done this one, so this is the one we're going to do. You could try that, I wouldn't recommend it, but yeah, so in that context, and God was good, helped me write another sermon in the midst of that time as well. But yeah, to know that, so sometimes you can be too organised. Sometimes other people don't like to fit in with your plans. So you might have this structure and you might have thought out some really great plans to do, And especially if you're leading a team of people, and there might be someone in your team who just doesn't think that's a great idea, and they'll go rogue on you. And how you deal with that is really important. So I think as an organised person, an administrator kind of person, you have a choice in those situations, particularly if you're investing in people, to not be so task-driven that you miss the people side of something. And so honouring the person and helping them come alongside, maybe understanding what it is that they've kind of gone rogue with and maybe why would really help in the midst of that. But understanding too that not everyone likes to be boxed into a routine or into a planned out structure that you might feel comfortable or I might feel comfortable in. And the other thing I realised too is I do like details, but I see details. And not everybody sees that. So sometimes when people would start talking about things, I'll see like a list of A to Z of all the things that need to be considered in that, whereas they're just dreaming pie in the sky stuff. And so it can be frustrating for people when I see the details and they don't necessarily. I have been the receiver of jokes about that. I have a photo of what someone did to my office one day because they decided that I love details so much that they would elf foil, I don't know if you can see it, every single thing on my desk, including pens and staplers and everything in my drawers, all elf foiled, because they said that I have a great attention to detail, so they wanted to repay the favour. It was a joke, it really was a joke. It sounds a bit mean, but it was a joke. And in their defence, they came and un-elf foiled everything as well, which was good. But it does help me to realise sometimes you can see too much sometimes, and I think that can be a detractor to what you want to try and do. So sometimes you have to either choose to stop looking or acknowledge that those details are there, but they're okay to stay there. They don't necessarily need to always be addressed if it gets to the extreme level, if that makes sense. How are you going? Any questions so far or comments? Are we allowed to do that? Or that's at the end, I think, actually, sorry. Sometimes when you plan things out and you go to really strong degrees of things, it's not always easy then to measure success, although this is a bit of a both end. So there's certain measurability, and then sometimes there's an unmeasurability in the sense of saying, where do you finish in your preparation? So we do an annual kids program called Mega Buzz that happens in the June-July holidays for kids from prep to grade 6. And it's massive, it's 3 days. We have normally between maybe 500 to 600 kids that come along. Then on top of that is when we have all our leaders, so a lot of our team leaders will come and be part of that as well. So it is an organised chaos. And it's great, and it's a great learning environment for people, but there's lots of scope then for things to go messy and be a little bit more loose in terms of what you can try and achieve. And in my first few years of doing it, I would work crazy hours trying to get it all done and still feel like I'd failed because there was still so much more you could do. And so I feel like in the detail, which is probably in that same with that last point, if you don't draw a line somewhere, there's never ever a finishing point. But the point is you have to sleep, and you do have to be functional, and you have to be healthy, because you want to last the distance, not just the 3 days. And so understanding what is a measurable amount to do and what's okay is good for you as a leader, and it's good for the people that you're leading. Otherwise, the expectations I've put on myself can actually start to flow out on the people who are underneath me, and they're not necessarily fair or realistic. And it certainly doesn't help you then to have a feeling of success at the end either. So trying to get that balance is really important. Then you can work with people who are even more detailed and organised than you are. I had this experience with a person who was on my Sunday kids team a few years back now. Very, very diligent, very hard-working person of an older generation. So I think that has also played into it as well. And I was like the constant source of frustration for her, which was hard for me to understand because I am an organised person, but she would tell me that I was so unorganised and I made her life really difficult. And I kid you not, like there'd be email after email. I got to the point where I was like, I must be this living, constant frustration to her because I couldn't meet her expectations. And in the end, I had to realise that sometimes I'm not going to, Part of the whole conversation for me was actually going, out of the peak of our pastoral team, she's got the best deal in terms of organisation. I'm not perfect, but I am organised. And so I can't live up to her extreme demands, but I can try and meet her halfway there. And so, and the things where I really was frustrating her, I went, this is a good time for me to analyse and go, can I do something better here that will help her? Meet halfway, but still not be extreme in terms of what she's actually asking me to do. And we did come to a really good compromise that worked well in what we were trying to do. But it also helped me to see that sometimes it is extreme. You can't always jump through every hoop that people will have for you either. Then you've got the people, so you've got the really organised, and then you've got the people who just aren't. So, and you probably, maybe you are them, and if that is you, that's great. If you're a dreamer and you have lots of dreams and lots of ideas, but you don't know how to put legs on them, sometimes that's the most frustrating thing for an organised person to work with. So, saying that there, because I don't know if you know Dave Twigg. I love Dave Twigg, and he is a dreamer, like the biggest dreamer you could ever imagine. Dave's best day in the office is a day full of meetings where we sit and we talk all day. Just talk about ideas. It would be like he loves those days. If he's actually out doing something and he hears we're having a meeting, he comes back to the office just to have the meeting. Like, he loves that. That's like my worst day. I shouldn't say that. I like being in a meeting, and I love it when we can discuss ideas, but I need to get somewhere. So if we just chat around in a circle and we don't actually accomplish anything in that meeting, I do feel like that's a waste of my time. So I've learnt to combat that a little bit. I'll bring my laptop so I can do other work if I need to while I'm in there. So it helps to feed my need of going, let's be productive. I can contribute to ideas as well. But I've also learnt the value of honouring the other people. And so what Dave brings is something that sometimes I won't. Sometimes I limit my dreams because I'm like, oh, that's going to take too much work. And sometimes I will be able to counter his dreams because I'll say, this is what you need to do to put legs on that, to make that actually happen. And so we kind of round each other out, if that makes sense. We need each other. It's good to have the diversity of skill set, even within a team that you create. So if you are one extreme of something, get some people around you that are other, because actually that will really help, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end as well. But yeah, sometimes it's not going to be significant to other people. It doesn't make it less important. It just means you have to understand people think about things differently. Sometimes too, being an organised administrator is all the not so fun jobs get lumped with you. Because one, you know they're needed, and two, sometimes you see them and nobody else will. I would spend a lot of my December, January time when everybody's holidaying. I used to not holiday because that's the best time to get work done, because it's quieter after Christmas has finished, and it's the time where everything's about to kick off. So if you could get ahead of time and you could be organised, you could get all this stuff done, then that's a really good thing to do. But it's actually a really sad thing to do, because on Instagram and social media, everyone's out having fun at the beach and you're still at work typing away. So sometimes that's a reality of the job, but you can work around that as well. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a martyr to do that. Sometimes it is about saying, these are the jobs that need to be done. Can somebody else do that? Like looking for people who could do it. If it's something you have to do still within your own capacity or role, finding ways of doing that, but not necessarily sacrificing things that you do want to do as well. But sometimes it is time consuming, sometimes it's not inspiring, but it's still necessary, and understanding that and what you bring to something as well is really important. Then obviously, just because you plan something one particular way doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen that way. I think if you talk to anybody who's a parent, they'll tell you that about their kids. And the reality is anything that you do with people is always going to be that way, because no one's fully predictable and you cannot control everything. If you think you can, congratulations, but the world will wake you up sometime soon to understand that actually that's not possible. There will be things, even with the most detailed plan that you could possibly do, that will like crop up and come along, and they'll challenge you, or you'll have to think on the spot. And that's why planning is good, but flexibility is important as well. But it also creates room, which we'll talk a little bit about in a moment as well. The other thing that can be a challenge in this kind of setting is that you create space for feedback and to review things. That's part of actually what this role really allows for and probably thrives on. But in doing that, you always open up the door for criticism that will come in as well. So learning how to manage that and how to encourage people not just to think critically but also to think helpfully is important to do. Otherwise, some of the challenges will be that you'll pour your heart and soul into something, you'll plan it to the nth degree, it won't necessarily go the way you planned it, you'll have some challenges, and then you'll just feel cop criticism at the end, and you'll just feel like, what is the point of being alive? That's extreme, and I've never felt that bad. But do you know what I mean? Like, you can get to the point where you're like, oh, was it worth the effort of doing that? Can be a challenge. But there's ways of changing all of that and understanding that in those challenges there are some incredible joys as well. But before I do that, I do want to share this quote with you. There's a book called First Things First by Stephen Covey. It's a great leadership book, worth reading if you get a chance. But he says this: changing a planning tool or a method won't create significant change in the results we're getting in our lives, although the implied promise is that it will. It's not a matter of controlling things more, better, or faster. It's questioning the whole assumption of control. I think one of the biggest challenges for personality types that are more in that organisational trend is to feel like if you have control, then you're actually in control. And so you can be very tight on that. And that can limit then what you actually do, but also allow to happen. And that is probably one of the greatest dangers I've experienced. I could get really narrow focused in, because I know this works and I know this is safe and I know this is reliable, we're going to do it this way. And it means that you're not really open to seeing what other things can come. So don't control things for control's sake, but understand why it is that you're doing what you're doing and how you can do it more effectively, and why you want to do it more effectively in the first place will allow lots of opportunities to go into that. So if there's some of the challenges, what are some of the joys? Like, why would you do it? If there's like lots of hard things about it, is there a point? Well, I'm going to tell you, I think there really is, and I think there's a lot that comes from having somebody with an organisational mindset working within your team, particularly if it's not a strength for you, but also to develop some of those skills yourself. Even if you go, oh, that's not me, there are some things that you can do that you can build into your ministry that will actually bring a lot of value to the people that you work with, but also even in your own ministry as well. If it is you, I really hope you're encouraged as well, because I don't know that it's necessarily always valued in a team context, but I guarantee you if they take you out of it and they're left to do that work without you, they'll definitely miss you. So it is a really valuable thing, and understanding why God's wired some people up this way particularly, and then harnessing that is really important. So what are some of the joys of organisation and people who can do that? You've heard a few of them already when I just came in to hear the end of that last session, but I believe and have experienced that being prepared allows for more detail, for more depth, and more delegation. 3 Ds. You can actually plan things to a better detail than you would if you were doing it on the fly. You might think, oh, I've got this, that's fine, I know that passage really well, so when I get to youth group tonight, I'm just going to talk about it because I've got it. But if you were to spend some time and actually sit and plan through it again, I guarantee you would actually think of something a little bit more deeper and with more detail than you would have if you just did it on the fly. So if you have time and you set aside a bit of time to do preparation, you will find that. You might also find that you don't need to be the person that does it. I think a lack of preparation means that I have to do more work. And I'm not saying that I shouldn't do work, but there's other things that I should do. And I'll get caught out doing things that actually someone else could do, is actually really wanting to do. And if I release them to do it, they'd be really happy and I'd be blessed. But if I'm short on time and I haven't prepared as much, I end up doing that instead. So being prepared allows for detail, depth, and delegation, and it will surprise you what comes out of that. When you control too much, you don't really allow for those kinds of things to come through. But when you when you have space to let people do that, then I think that's where real flourishing takes place as well. It allows for spontaneity and creativity. To be prepared seems like most people would say, and you heard that earlier as well, that actually it would crush that, but actually the opposite happens. So when you are prepared and you plan things out, you actually give space that creates like a guideline of this is where we're going, these are the goals of what we want to do, but now there's time for you to say, how could we do that different? how could I do that in my unique style? How could I harness the things and the resources that I have to create something that might be more creative and more spontaneous than what I would have done if I just was planning ABC, because I'm time poor and I just need to tell you to do this job. So when we do our Mega Buzz program, because we have our teenage leaders coming in who are obviously not very experienced in leadership roles so much, and they're given a team of 5 kids that they might be paired up to work with. They're their little cell group, if you want to call it that. And they have an area that they can decorate. So we'll tell them, your goal is to make a space that your kids will feel like this is our special space. This is where we get to hang whenever we have our downtime. It's a space where they belong. You can do that any way you want to. You just have the colour green, and you might have the colour purple. You can come up with a name that fits our theme. You can do whatever your heart so desires. It's up to you. But as long as you've got a space. Now, some people will take that and run with it, and they'll just create, like one girl one year did a yellow submarine. She made it out of cardboard. It was this incredible thing, and it's amazing. Other people might be a bit more standard in their things, but either way, everyone's created a zone, and every child, when they come, have that place that they belong with leaders who actually know them, and that's how they do. So you create the guidelines, you create the goal, but then they're allowed to do whatever they want to do in whatever way they're wired to do that. And that allows a diversity of personality and skills and practice to come through, even in a ministry where you might have planned out quite a lot of things. But you need to do the planning and the preparation to allow for that spontaneity to come through. Sometimes too, that might happen in a week, like a weekly kind of ministry. So on a Friday night, we do a kids club, and we plan out our terms to say this week we might do the Easter, like it's an Easter night coming up, so we have 4 rotations. These are the ideas of the rotations we're going to do, and we might delegate different leaders to do that. We'll give them a suggestion of an activity, but then they can take that and say, one, I don't get that, I don't really know how to play it, it's confusing to me, can we do it this way? Or they might say, oh, actually I saw this played somewhere else, can we do this idea? So they have opportunity to change things, but they also know there's actually this fallback that says, this is what we're going to do if there's nothing else to do, or you don't have a better idea, or you're comfortable with running this. It's not a bad option, it's actually a good one, but there's still scope for you to do that, to change it, because there's enough time between those times as well to do that as well. And to get the resources you might need, if that makes sense in the midst of it. It allows you to develop other people. So I think I've got a photo. This is, when I started taking over kids ministry, we changed our whole structure. And so I obviously oversee it, but I was running a lot of it. And then understood that actually part of the plan is that I shouldn't, if a ministry hinges on me being there, then it's actually not a successful ministry. It should be a ministry that can be running, not people driven in the sense of only one person ever there. And so when you plan and you can prepare and you're organised, you can actually also start to build up people and release people into more specific roles of responsibility as well, because you take the time to invest in them personally. That actually takes planning. It takes planning to see the skills in people and the gifts that they have, to know what you should be investing in and harnessing, and then releasing. So these 2 guys who are on the stage, Katie and Ty, very different people to each other, and very different to me. But allowing them the space to actually step up into leadership has created a more, I think, a more realistic picture of what it means then to work in a kingdom kind of context than just me getting up and saying, this is what children's ministry looks like and how we need to do it. And so taking the time to invest in that, to plan and to prepare. And there's a lot of stuff that comes behind the scenes for that then too. So there's a lot of administration things that I will do to make sure that on a Sunday they're very free. That's part of the role that I play now. It means less of the hands-on stuff for me, which sometimes I struggle with because I really love the teaching aspect. But to be able to release people means that I need to give them some of that time, so that I need to do the stuff that's going to make that possible for them, because they're not necessarily employed by the church to do those things. So I give them I kind of set them up to succeed so that they can do that. Some of the other things too, and this kind of goes hand in hand with all of that, is that being prepared means that you can define what an expectation is. The biggest frustration for people who are volunteering in a ministry is that they come and they don't know what they're supposed to do, where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to bring, or how they know they've succeeded. And so you want to be able to define that, because you want people to feel valuable, to make a contribution, and actually to finish the night or event or whatever it is that they're doing with you as if they're actually on the right track. I don't think this is ministry specific. I think life is often that we never really tell people what they do well. We only necessarily tell them when they need to improve on things. But building those structures in place actually really helps people to grow, but also to know that they're valued and they're part of a team as well. So not just at the end of the year at the Christmas party where we say thank you so much because if you weren't here we couldn't do it, which is true, but actually every week helping people to feel part of that, to feel more released into that as well, and so that they can actually do things as part of what God's called them to do. So it creates those expectations, and like I said, those clear guidelines of what is a goal, like what's kicking a goal in this ministry, what's success, and then how do I do that? What shouldn't I do? Like, should I not pick up a kid and swing them around by their arms on the top of my head? No, probably not a great idea. But yes, you can have conversations with them in public, like, do you know what I mean? Some clear ways. Yes, build relationship, but these are the guidelines to keep you safe and keep them safe. So those things that sometimes feel like boring details to the dreamers are actually really important, and you've heard some of them before as well. But the safety aspect is really important when you're dealing with anybody 18 and under, actually I think with any person, because you value the person, so you want to keep them safe. And part of those things are actually having to think out what that looks like and stick within that. Being organised creates a great dynamic for team ministry. Hopefully you picked that up even already as I've been saying things through, but because the diversity of people means that everyone comes with something different to bring, organisation allows actually for people to bring those things to the table, and not just for one person to dominate. So not just for the ideas person to always be the person speaking, but maybe for the people who come with something to say but don't necessarily feel the space is always given for them. It creates space for that, and it creates structures sometimes to be able to do that. So if you're in a team meeting and you realise that there's only ever 2 people who speak in that context, think of another way of getting feedback or ideas from people can actually come from that, to say, well, maybe everyone email me this week an idea, or everyone write down your idea on a piece of paper before we share, and actually collect up those sheets of paper anyway. So thinking beyond just what's simple or easy or convenient to actually how can I involve a whole team sometimes takes planning and intentionality as well. I said before about the opening up of criticism, but what being organised does also allows for a measuring of how are we tracking? Is this working? Are there things that we could do better? That honours what we're doing and celebrates that, but also says we're never there yet. And not in a bad way that puts you down, but that in a way that inspires, let's keep on growing and moving, keep on recreating things, because actually that's exciting, and that's something that can keep inspiring people as they keep coming and joining us as well. So being organised allows you to do those things, having structures to feed back in, or to analyse, or to measure, that says we're actually intentionally wanting to say, is this working? If it is, why is it working? What are we doing here? How can we then harness that better? If it's not, why isn't it? And what can we do to help people? Or do we need to stop doing that activity and start doing these things, asking those questions as well? And it enables you to plan with a long-term view. If you're just going week by week, you can do some great things, and it doesn't mean that it's not awesome. And there have been seasons in my life where that's just the reality of ministry. You flat out, and so every event that you do, or every ministry that you're running, is like you finish one and you just jump onto the next one. That sometimes is part of life. But if you can get to a space where you can actually start planning long term, then you can actually start making things work for a greater purpose than just an event. They can actually start to build in together and relate to each other, to actually be to be contributing toward the bigger goals that you might have. And you can start to see how that might work. So that happens within your ministry setting, but I think the greatest synergy about that as well is it should happen within a kingdom kind of perspective as well. So not just for what you're doing, but what maybe your church is contributing to, because your mission for your ministry should equal the same mission that your church has. You should be working together. And then that's your kingdom goal as well. So it gives you this bird's eye view, which I think I've got a photo. You know when you're in a plane and you look out over everything and you can see, being organised allows you to take a step back to be able to have that kind of overview of things that you wouldn't necessarily have if you're literally just running flat out and don't have the time to kind of analyse that and understand what that could look like for you. So it is definitely a blessing. It can keep you grounded about what it is that you're actually doing and why you're doing it. And so I think it's got a lot to offer. And in terms of the future role, I think there's a couple of things here, and probably I don't know the fullness of what your subject is and how you are probably looking at all different leadership roles, but I do think there's part that everything needs to play. God designed us differently for a reason, and when we celebrate that and when we allow people to flourish and function in that, we bring something to the body of Christ that's amazing when everyone plays their part. So leadership is more than just about being organised, and more than just about being a dreamer, and more than just about one specific thing. It's all of those things playing together. I think the Bible's clear that Jesus was a servant-hearted leader, and he was intentional about relationship. And I think if any one of our skill sets or personalities actually drives us from being relational, I think that's where we really need to look at it and examine why it is that we do what we do and why that's a value for us. So for me personally, I definitely am a perfectionist, but I do see how God has mellowed the perfectionism in my life to allow for it to be a good thing to bring into ministry, but not to be a detrimental thing that can actually harm people and harm myself as well. So to understand the balance of that, to celebrate it and not say that's bad, but to allow the healing of that to come through. And I think because if people matter, which they do to God, then what we do has to matter in how we're relating with people, and has to bring something relationally into what we're doing. So I think that's important in terms of what we're doing. I do believe that there's a diversity of what we have to bring as well. And I probably see that in the context I'm in a really clear way, because we're a team of, there's about 9 pastors on staff at Bridgman. We're all very different. Wired differently, different passions, different personalities, and so when you put us all together in a room, you could go, well, that person is more pastoral, that they look more like a pastor than that person, but actually that's not true. God's called us each individually and uniquely into the role that we have to play, and we each have to play that our own. We can't compare with one another or compete with one another. We actually have to celebrate the differences and allow ourselves to bring what we've been told to bring, and let the Holy Spirit inspire that and then use that in a really powerful way. And I think that's true in whatever context that you're in. But these are a couple of things in terms of future things that I thought would be good just to think about and leave with you, because there's a book called Mission Drift. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's actually another really great book as well. But these guys were looking at how every organisation has the potential to start with something great and drift from what it was their intentional thing. And they make 2 quotes I just want to share with you. The first one talks about how leaders will often talk about what they do or how they do it, and then finally transition to why. But the reality is that actually great innovators start with why, because the ordering does matter. Why you do what you do should actually help you to understand then what it is that you're going to do. And asking yourself that question, right down to the smallest detail, I think is important. Why is it important to mark a role for us, for people coming to our church? Do we just do that because we've always done that and that's what we do? Or is there an intentionality about that? And is that important for us to keep doing if we're growing beyond a certain size? What do we want to hold on to as our church? These are questions we would ask that are important, and why? Why should we do that? The next quote, same book, says that our highest goal is to remain faithful to our Christ-centered identity and mission. Because of our identity, we must pursue excellence. And he talks in the book, it's a lot about measuring things and why you measure. So not just to say we do this well, but actually to say, is what we're doing actually meeting the driving need that we have, which is the identity that we have, that mission that God has given us, and holding tightly to that. And that's, I believe, is really important with that overall picture that you have, to constantly go, we can get caught up and busy doing lots of great things, but what is actually that we've been called to do, and are we doing that? And anything we add into that, is that still actually flowing in with that as well? But the last one is a quote from Dan Rayland, which is from a book called Amplified Leadership. And it says, no matter how great our leadership ability may be, life will present challenges that remind us of our dependence on God. Although each of us has been given gifts and talents, without the power of God we can do little that lasts. Only the power of God enables us to keep our character intact. We must lean into God's grace, love and power, and we must pray. Our best connection to God's power is on our knees in sweet conversation with Him. He is our source, our righteousness, our character, our all in all. Without Him, we can hang up our gloves because the fight is over. So no matter what your giftings might be, and no matter what your calling can be, without God, we are powerless. And so we actually need to constantly just rest in Him and allow Him to do what we need to do and be who we need to be as well. A lot of information